Good evening. My name's Janet Galpin. I'm here representing the Boonwurrung Foundation. So Wominjeka. Wominjeka is the Boonwurrung language word for come with purpose. which is very fitting considering that everything we do, from waking in the morning to sleeping in the evening, is done with purpose. Tonight you're all here for purpose of a new Koorie Youth Council initiative, Young Mob Yarns, in partnership with YIRRAMBOI and the Wheeler Centre. This is a very important initiative for all of you young people. You are our future. And my purpose this evening is to perform a welcome to country, to formally welcome you on behalf of the YIRRAMBOI Wheelam of the Bunwurrung, whose lands we are on today. We pay our respect to the Wurundjeri of the Woiwurrung, with whom we share common boundaries throughout the city. This country is unceded land. I'm a direct descendant from our First Peoples and cousin to Narweet, Dr. Carolyn Briggs, AM, the elder of the Bunwurrung and the YIRRAMBOI Wheelam clan, and I am here today representing her, and I also want to acknowledge my Irish and English ancestors. To our ancestors, we pay our respect, not just today, but always, to all of our ancestors, those people who came before us. Our lands extend from the Wilson's Promontory in the west to the Werribee in the east, encompassing both of our beautiful bays, Western Port and Port Phillip. So today we're especially pleased to recognise the commitment that you've made here today in paying respect to the spirit of this land and to our First Peoples. Through this, you have shown the willingness to honour sacred ground. We are spiritually and culturally connected to this country by the thousands of generations of our ancestors. This country is in our DNA, and that is why connection to country is so important to our First Peoples. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were this country's first explorers, first navigators, first engineers, first farmers, first botanists, first scientists, first diplomats, first astronomers, first teachers, first artists, and first healers. Most people don't want to think about that continuity of connection and how amazing our people were. And at the moment, we're looking anywhere from 80,000 to 120,000 years of continued culture. So these are all the wonderful things that have come before us. And we love it that everybody today are getting great education and can move on through the system and carry everything, our ancestors' stories, knowledge, and to always be proud and stand tall. Australia also has the world's oldest oral stories, and the First Peoples engraved the world's first maps and made the earliest paintings of ceremony. And the very first footprints on this continent were those belonging to our First Peoples. But unfortunately, our First Peoples are unknown to many who live in this land. As people of the continent, now known as Australia, while we have all descended from different clans, different language groups, and also from countries all across the world, we ask that you support our elders' rights for a voice to government, our rights for a treaty, which Victoria has started on that pathway, and also for the truth-telling to be told about Australia's dark history. And again here in Victoria, leading the way, a Justice Commission is underway for this purpose. Some people say 180 years too late, but at least we're now on that pathway, so it's taken a long time to get to this point. The word Wominjeka, as I said earlier, translates to come with purpose, and it's also a contract between the people as the custodians of this land and yourselves to ensure that the laws of Bunjil, our Creator, are adhered to, and to guarantee safe passage for those who ask. According to tradition, our land has always been protected by our Creator Bunjil, who travels as an eagle, and by one who protects our waterways and travels as a crow. Bunjil taught us the responsibility that we have for this land and to always welcome guests. But we must ask all peoples and guests to commit to 2 promises that we ask of you here today. 1, not to harm the land of Bunjil, and 2, to not harm the children of this beautiful land. And if we can commit ourselves to these 2 promises, we live in a better world. This commitment was usually made by dipping some boughs of leaves into the waters and the spoken words, Wominjeka. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Auntie Janet, for your warm welcome, for the words that you transpired. Absolutely an honour to be here in your presence, and thank you for welcoming us to country. For those who don't know, my name is Dougie Briggs. I'm a proud Yoo-rrook man. Through my father, I'm a Briggs and a Cooper, and through my mother, I'm a Morgan and a Parter. 4 very proud families that I'm very proud to be a part of. And the legacy that they left behind for me is one that I don't hold lightly. I say, there's a saying that Uncle Alf Bamblett, may he rest in peace, you stand on the shoulders of the giants who walk before you. And I'm very blessed to have some pretty big shoulders to stand on. So thank you for joining us today for Young Mob Yarns, partnership with YIRRAMBOI and the Koorie Youth Council, providing a space where we can actually have yarns about the things that are important to us as young people. As young Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people in Victoria, the issues that concern us, the highlights that we have in our lives that aren't shared really widely amongst the rest of society. So this is an incredible opportunity for us to yarn about, as Auntie Janet said, with the Truth and Justice Commission, the Yoo-rrook Commission coming into play, how do we as young people play a part in that? How do we as young people inform ourselves of what's going on? And how do we as young people continue with the outcomes that will come from the Justice Commission? So thank you for joining us. As I said, I've got 3 amazing panellists to my left here, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves in a second. Before we do that though, I would just like to reflect and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the lands in which we're gathering, the Bunwurrung and the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional custodians of this land here in Naarm. I pay my respects to Auntie Janet, to your elders, Auntie Janet, to the elders of the Wurundjeri people, and to the elders of many of us Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people in this room and joining us online on Facebook or wherever you may be joining from. I pay my respects to your loved ones, to your family, and acknowledge that this country, our sovereignty was not ceded at all. I would also just like to reflect on the situation we're living in, COVID-19. It's been a manic, 18 months, and I think the success of the Victorian Aboriginal community is thanks to the grassroots community members who have led the information sharing campaigns, who have informed our young people and our old people about the importance of staying safe during these really crazy times. And just from my people, the people that I know, I don't know anyone that's been infected with COVID, and that's reflective of the incredible success of our Aboriginal community-controlled organisations and whatnot. So I think it's really important that there's a lot of lessons that the rest of society can learn from us as Aboriginal people and our values that we have. I would also like to reflect and take a moment, and in a moment to have a minute's silence for our loved ones, our people who have unfortunately passed away in custody. There have been far too many since the 1991 Royal Commission to Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, let alone since March, the numbers of brothers and sisters across the country who we lost. So I just ask for everyone to have a moment's silence as we pay our respects to them, their families and their loved ones who are grieving and continue to grieve right now. Thank you. So, with that being said, I'd like to allow the panellists now to introduce themselves, who they are, where they're from. Bonnie, if you want to go first.
Thanks, Dougie. And also for myself, I'd just like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the lands that I've lived on. My name's Bonnie Dukakis. I'm a proud Gundi Jamara woman, but grew up down on Gippsland on Gunai Kurnai country. Been living here in Melbourne for 3 years now, and I guess last year really kind of hit me with the importance of being able to get home and get home to family. Been missing that, trying to get back more.
Yeah, thanks, Dougie. Also, I'd like to pay my respects to elders both past and present. Acknowledge that we are on Yoo-rrook Justice country. Pay my respects to Wurundjeri, neighbouring community as well. Yeah, I'm proud Koorie Pickeron, Wadawurrung and Nudda man. Born and raised on Wadawurrung country down Geelong, but frequently go back to my countries up home in Alice Springs and down Wamba way, Framlingham.
G'day, my name is Christopher Saunders. I'm a Gunda Jamara man from southwest Victoria. Currently having the privilege to live out on country, so on Gunda Jamara country, and that's where I work currently within the community there.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. And just a little bit further, professionally, what is it that keeps you, getting out of bed in the morning? What do you do in the day-to-day, Bonnie? What do you do for work?
I work at the Youth Justice Centres. I work with young mob in custody with the school, so working around how they maintain connection to culture, family and community while they're in that space, and how we can support them to transition back to community around education and employment opportunities. Solid.
Geordie?
Yeah, I work at Wollongong Aboriginal Cooperative. I'm the traditional and culture advisor there, so making sure that our organisation is being culturally appropriate on all levels or sectors. Also, on First Peoples Assembly, Victoria. As a Southwest elected member and a dad, so it's a job in itself.
That's it.
Myself, I'm an Aboriginal youth worker down at DWEC, which is the local Aboriginal organisation in Portland District. So day to day working with young people in all aspects of education, health, mentoring, but mostly just trying to give them experiences that, kids in the regions don't always get to have.
Yeah, solid. Amazing. 3 young people here all doing incredible stuff, whether it's working within Aboriginal organisations, community-controlled organisations, or working within the system. I think it's really admirable, the work that you're all doing on a day-to-day, and, that might be the 9 to 5. We know that the responsibilities, as you touched on, Geordie, as a father, the responsibilities even as Aboriginal community members extend beyond those 8 hours a day. So definitely appreciate you coming on and having a yarn with us here in the panel. Let's get into it. What is the Yoo-rrook Justice Commission? What is it, and what does it mean right now? Maybe, Geordie, if you want to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so really big legislation that was passed. It was raised to us by Jace Kelly, proud Muddy man, also on the First Peoples Assembly. Raised that to the Assembly to get this Truth and Justice Commission up. There's been a couple different parts all across the world, and he had contacts in the UN and everything like that. So they got a hold of him to see if we could get something up, and it did, and it's just evolved into what we're getting up now, and hopefully we can get the right mob in and really start to shake the system up and get what's needed to progress Victoria and the Aboriginal communities within Victoria, more importantly as well. So that's what it is right now. The commissioners are in the process of getting selected. I think there's an announcement. I think it's tomorrow.
Yeah.
It'll be. It's really, really big news, and if we get this up, it's going to be an absolute game changer for Victoria and for Indigenous people, First Nations people within Victoria. Really, really important, and it is definitely trailblazing for the rest of the country, and every other state's kind of looking at us to see what's going to happen, and look at both the positives and negatives out of all of it, and pick it apart. So this is just a stepping stone, and it will evolve over time. So absolutely. It is really exciting. So
Absolutely. Thanks, Bros. And I know that, like, this was something that the Assembly called for, that, if we're going to build a treaty or treaties and looking towards the future of what may happen with those outcomes, it's important to acknowledge and address the past atrocities and injustices that have happened. So I know that's a massive thing that Assembly called for from the very start, and I think it's a credit to each of you to actually put this in its place.
Yeah, and I think every treaty all across the world, it all started with truth-telling first. So it is definitely the first step. We met with Professor Megan Davis, to get advice before we put it up, and it was like first step was to get that truth-telling and the justice of that truth-telling, and that way we can move forward and have that open dialogue. So yeah, it's massive. So I'm really excited to see where this space goes.
100%, 100%. And so then I guess a question for all of you then, and as a broad and diverse community that we are here in Vic, and there are various wants and needs that we all have regardless of where we may be, where our positions lie. What outcomes do you hope that this Truth and Justice Commission could achieve? Bonnie?
I'd like to see the education particularly, so working in that space that it's at the forefront and it's mandatory that we're learning in school around what's actually happened, that it doesn't fall on our Aboriginal young fellas or us as black fellas in the space to always answer the questions, and that people are like anyone's equipped with the knowledge. As we know, the knowledge is power, and then that, I think, is a way we can move forward.
Absolutely. What about you, Chris? You have any thoughts, bros?
Yeah, echoing what Bonnie just said as well, I think, gathering resources that various Indigenous communities have and knowledge around both good and bad is a way of moving forward, which, I would also like, all the stories that we heard. So, we focus a lot on, the bad and the good, but just excelling all the stories that we have to tell, because I feel like they're all important in moving forward and creates a good broader picture of Aboriginal communities within Victoria. And not shy away from it. Face that stuff head on, because as we said, there's stories and there's people's experiences, and we have to understand that to really move on from that. Yeah.
100%. Anything else, Jordy, you want to add? What are you thinking?
I mean, after looking at all the different ones all across the world, and seeing what what worked for them or what didn't work for them, and trying to pick the best bits. I mean, there's so many different avenues that need to be picked up for our mob to succeed, and for the whole of Victoria to progress as a community, and then eventually us as a nation. So there's so many different avenues. You can't really start at one, but same as Bonnie, education obviously starts at the youngest level, and then eventually all levels. So it's kind of changing now. The youth are definitely started to change. 2020, 2019 really, and has really started to pick up in changing the world and how we view things. So it is starting to change, but there's so many different avenues that we can go down that, it just depends on what we start with first.
100%. And so then, Geordie, being in the space as a First Peoples Assembly member, we know that, this role in itself invokes a lot of emotions. It invokes a lot of very passionate feelings from mob. We've been calling for truth and justice. We've been calling for treaty for many years now. As an Assembly member and a community member, how do you navigate the expectations that you may have of yourself in your role and that community may have of you as well?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I knew going in, I said in my opening speech, the process was pretty crap, going into it. Me and Chris sat on the community assembly, and we mapped out a really good system that could make it not divisive, and then it became RAPs got in, and reserve seating and all that jargon, and it just kind of got lost. And as I said, the process at the start was very, very, very in shambles, and we're starting to slowly get into the groove now. So I knew the process was going to be hard from the get-go. But, we are starting to get there. It is tough, there's still a lot of things that I wouldn't do personally. But, I got to respect, I'm just an individual and I'm representing the Southwest, and whatever the Southwest says, it's not my opinion, it's Southwest. And obviously it was tough in COVID year. I couldn't get out to communities and have those yarns. So it was very tough to have an opinion on that, on certain situations. But we're starting to slowly get into it, as long as there's open conversation with mob, it's whether it's good or bad, take it in. But it can get very tough at times. But I'm also loving just the journey of how we can. Looking at all the different models, how we can, where we can go to. That's really exciting for me to start learning those different systems and learn policies and things like that. So, it's tough, but it's nothing that we haven't done before.
That's right.
Probably just another thing, like seeing faces like Geordie and like young people that we've grown up with, in those spaces. Like, but it's good seeing when you think of like the hierarchy of how young people are meant to act, and in types of situations or like conversations, young people are not always left out, but there's a hierarchy to that. You have your aunties and uncles that have like that lead a conversation, and you're meant to respect what they say. But when you see conversations around this truth and the commission and the First People's Assembly, and you see faces like Geordie, and you have live streams like this where we get together and have these kind of discussions. It's good. It's positive, and it's something that we should strive for.
Absolutely. It's so important for us to have a seat at the table. It's so important for us to be able to share the voices of our peers, of our cousins and our families as well, who often don't get that voice. And I don't know, it always comes from a place of respect. We always respect our elders. We always respect the people that we have in the room. But I think even in my time, being involved in these sort of spaces, I think our elders are actually looking for us for guidance as well. And they're looking to hear our voices because, we are so in tune with the rest of our communities. We're accountable to our communities because we see our brothers and sisters on the day-to-day going through whatever things they may be going through. So I think, absolutely agree with what you said there, Chris. I think it's really important to be in this. Yeah.
And, I think that was one of the hardest things when I first started was, there's a lot of, I'm the youngest on there, and there was a lot more people that had, most of them have started a lot of organisations, and having that, they all knew me as a baby, and I'm related to half of them anyway, but it was just like, you'll pipe down, I'll follow, but I think when we got into that space, and I'm not afraid to speak my mind and say anything, because it all comes from respect and love. But that was definitely one of the challenges. And then when once I took down that barrier, it was definitely we're all on the same level here. It doesn't matter what age or how many organisations boards you sit on, or how many organisations you've set up. We're all on the same level here. That's why we're here. So, but that was definitely a challenge when I first started.
Yeah, for sure. And so I want to just sort of come to you, Bonnie, and talking about some of the work that you do, right? As you said, you work within the Justice Centres in Malmesbury and Parkville, engaging with young mob about education, employment, trying, steer them and guide them to the right track again. What was the inspiration for even pursuing this opportunity and other opportunities that you've had?
For me, I started it's hard when it comes to the region and finding jobs, and I managed to end up in justice down in Gippsland, and I was working predominantly with adult men on community-based orders, and I was hearing a lot around some of their challenges and their experiences, and hearing that they'd come through the youth justice system. And for me, it was how do I get into that space? How do we get into a space to give voice to young people that are generally spoken more about than asked or been involved and in conversations? And and I guess the other part of it, stepping away from justice, still in the space, but working with education. It's an exciting place to have those conversations around what's next and what they want. Sometimes can be like the first time that they're asked, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be, and how do you want to be a role model for your family? And it's hard because you can only do so much in a space. And when you're talking with young mob that are under 18, all that complexities. But yeah, for me, it's, I don't know, like it's just being able to sit and listen to their journeys, and how that, I guess, can guide where they want to be, but also giving them those opportunities or creating those opportunities. Like I've been very fortunate to have some strong role models for me at home and in work and everything, and some young mob don't get that same chance or that same like experience. So it's not around what I can do for them, but it's how I can support them on their journeys. How we can, I guess, walk alongside them, pull them back in line when they need, but also, like, I guess, just learn from them as well. Got a lot to offer.
Absolutely. And so with that being said then, in regards to this space and treaty and justice and truth-telling, young mob that you work alongside, how much do they know about what's going on, if at all? And what are their thoughts on it? Is this even in their frame of thinking? Or are they just trying to, they've got so much other things to worry about, like education and employment and where they're going to go, that this isn't even something they've thought about?
Well, back when they were starting the treaty discussions, we had Treaty Commission actually come out, which was really useful. It was great to see them coming in to yarn with young mob that don't get that opportunity often. But I think, like, particularly how far it's moving along, not necessarily something at the forefront for them, but also it's, like, I think the challenge sometimes can be envisioning themselves in that space, what can they offer and what that looks like. Yeah.
100%. And I think, you know, it's important that we bring alongside every member of our community, regardless of whatever position they may be in, whatever circumstances that they've had in their life that they've faced. It's important to bring them along and inform them. And I think, you know, I mean, from my experience to this date, the transparency and accountability of the First Peoples Assembly has been good. You know, the messaging has been out there, the utilisation of social media to spread those messages. And especially, you know, I think with the Truth and Justice Commission, there was the opportunity to provide public feedback to the candidates that nominate themselves. And I just want to ensure that, you know, especially for our young mob who might be, you know, in justice, how are we still ensuring that we're making them part of this journey as well? So I think it's something to reflect on. But with that being said, then, over to you, Chris. You know, your work as a youth worker at DWEC, and, you know, being a proud young person yourself, living on country, how are young people feeling, and what are their thoughts around this space within truth, telling, and justice and treaty for those that live, you know, out down in Portland, down the southwest?
We don't have like the privilege of, when you come to spaces and communities like Melbourne, where like it's the hot pot of like forward thinking for culture and identity and everything like that. You know, we take it as it comes, and it's kind of like we get the waves from everything that happens here. You know, because it's different down when you're living in such a small town, because you know, you might want to go out there and talk about truth-telling and all that kind of stuff, but we don't really see the impact for it, you know? There's definitely an opportunity for these conversations to be had, and I think that's where we should be accessing all of the stories, and that's where that should come from. But yeah, at the moment, you know, we're just there. There's a potential, but it's not affluent enough. The conversations aren't there. But obviously, we just come out of one of the craziest times in our lives, and young people out here doing TikToks. And we're trying to like shift that idea away from, you know, like, you know, back into business, I guess.
Yeah.
And it is big business. You know, it's something that if you don't actively seek this stuff out or want to be part of the conversation, it's hard to access, I would say.
Absolutely. That's it. That's it. I think it's, you know, as you said, for mob who live in Melbourne and the hot pot of all these forward thinking and the cultural ideas, as you said, I think it can be easy to forget that, you know, for mob that live regionally, rurally, you know, that's when I have to ground myself, you know, by speaking to some of my family who live in Shepparton and whatnot, about what are the things that they're going through, because on the day-to-day lives, you know, they're not necessarily concerned about the Truth and Justice Commission. It may not be at the front of their minds.
Yep.
And so how do we ensure that, you know, young people are still being informed? And I think,
yeah, you know, having, like I said, there's potential and there's spaces, you know, access and local ACCOs, like down home we have Windamara and Dweck and the Gunjamara Cooperative, like accessing these spaces where we already have a prominent community, you know, and we have people like Geordie and the other commissioners to be able to come out and, you know, speak the word, give them the gospel, because like it would only benefit our mob once we hear about it. You know, yeah. I think one of the biggest things is accessing the spaces that are already there, not trying to create something like that's here down in these regional areas, because it won't work. It doesn't work. Yeah, different perspectives, different communities.
Absolutely. And I was just reflecting, like, you know, thinking about this conversation, and you know, Lily Graham, one of our deadly executive members of the Koorie Youth Council, spoke about how often we have programs that will either address each extreme end of the spectrum, right? For young mob who are excelling and doing incredibly well, they might be, you know, whatever field it may be, whether it's sport, whether it's education, whether it's the community work that they do, doing really well, and we do a lot of stuff for young mob who are doing that to continue to push them, as we should. And then there's obviously on the other end of the scale for our young mob who are disconnected, who are disengaged, who have a complex, you know, range of needs, as you touched on, Bonnie, and are involved in the youth justice system. It's, you know, we obviously have to address that as well. But for our young mob who don't sit on either end, who are probably in the middle, who may not consider themselves leaders, but still going through the struggles of being a young black person in this country, how do we ensure that, you know, they're being involved in this process? What do we need to do, as I guess as community leaders, as young people in the positions that you all have? How do you feel can bring apart the middle section of our community and our cohort? How do we bring them along? Is there, for anyone else, want to answer that one there?
I think it has to be accessible. You've got to be able to picture yourself in the process, whether that's creating the space, using spaces that are already there, whether it's through your local ACCO, but also, and I think the other part is like, how do you access the young mob that aren't in those spaces, and particularly like, because it is challenging. Like, I sit here and I talk around from what I've seen in my own experiences. I'm not speaking on behalf of others, and it's that permission, I think, as well. Like, it's a challenge that I think we have as well. But
yeah, I mean, it's a tough question that we've been, as the Assembly has been battling. Since we started, it was how do we get out to everybody that's in between. It's tough. I mean, I don't really have an answer. I mean, is the stuff that we're doing now in terms of putting it out, as much as we can on socials working, maybe. Or does it stem back to when we first started, and then everyone was on board, and then there was a couple of things in between that kind of turned the community off, and is that why it's it may not be working? There's so many different things. I just don't have the answer. I mean, we've got to try to do our best to get out to every single group, and try and find that happy medium for everyone. Unfortunately, we're not going to get everyone. It's just the reality. But we just got to keep putting that word out, and we got to keep putting that word out of educating yourselves as well. So what is happening, and everything's on that website. but yeah, and we've got to get out to community more. As I said, COVID was kind of a nothing year. You know, we just couldn't do anything. But yeah, full steam ahead. I think now, we can go into everything. Hopefully, sure. No one gets any COVID right now, but. But yeah, I think we can, just start to really push into all different groups and sectors in the communities. In my community in the southwest, more particularly.
Yeah, for sure. And you sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, Chris, about utilising the echoes and the spaces that already exist. Not reinventing the wheel. And so, how to then, for young mob that live regionally, rurally, may get the information from Facebook or whatnot, and are often, the information sharers in their communities, and their families. They might have their nans asking, what's going on with this treaty business? Have you heard anything about this? How do we then ensure that, we're supporting young mob who have to be, the information sharers, the gatherers and the collectors of those knowledges, and facing a number of different things? How do we support and nurture young mob so they're not doing it on their own, I guess, as an extension of what we just talked about then?
I honestly believe that all the systems that we as young people need to excel, we have. And when we don't have that, we can look to services within our communities such as ACOs. We have the family support systems, and when the family support systems aren't there, we have these mentor programs, and I feel like one of the biggest supports I think we should give young people that are doing the hard work and, collecting all this information and really being a voice is to support them and really, support them in the way that, to guide them. I feel like when I'm only in the position I am today because of the people that have got me here. My uncles and my aunties and my nans and, all the cousins around me now. And I think within this Truth Justice Commission, you're going to need that as just as much, even more so, because, the information, and like we said, it's going to be good, it's going to be bad, and it's going to affect young people so much. Well, it should affect everybody a lot, but young people, we're taking on a load that it's not just ours, it's the people that come before us. It's their stories, it's their lives and experiences, and I feel like that's a lot of burden. And we're going to need that support as young people. And burnout in our generation is so huge and it's widespread, and it encompasses so much. So I think self-support through your community and services and access and that when you need.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you sort of touched on the people around you that helped you to be where you are today, because I was going to ask that question anyway, and Bonnie, you touched on it as well. I guess, how much do you really... So, let me start again. The support networks that you've had in your lives have helped you to be where you are today, correct? How do you replicate that for other young people who may be considered leaders in their community but not have the confidence to believe it themselves? How do we help to nurture those young people who are, being the information sharers, being the ones who carry that burden with them for their families? Maybe reflecting on your own journeys, how do you think we can nurture that for the next crop of young leaders coming through? Geordie?
It's definitely a tough space, because, we are young people ourselves. It is that fear of burning out. I burnt out, pretty hard last year, and it was good that I could go away, to Northern Territory back home in Alice and go through law and, really ground myself. But now that I've come back, it's connecting up. Previously, before me going away, was I was running youth groups and men's groups down home in Geelong, trying to get one up in Warrnambool, over Zoom, which was tough in itself. But trying to get other men in the community to be mentors to the young fellas going through high school, you know, through that 14, 15, 16-year-old stage. You know, it was also tough as well because, you know, not everyone, you know, you can't just, you know, dump a mentor on somebody, you know. But, you know, just trying to get those young fellas to understand that there's all these men around that can help. You know, being in that exact situation, no matter what you feel, and one of these fellas would have gone through that same situation. So, yeah, it is definitely tough. It is definitely a tough space to go into. But, yeah, just trying to get other fellas involved and other people involved to make sure that these kids have, you know, those right mentors. I'm very lucky that I've got, you know, some really strong mentors around me that I can, you know, go to for advice. So, yeah, just trying to get those kids to reach out to those networks, or them followers to reach out to them young kids to, you know, get them involved or take them down to the beach or do whatever to make sure that their needs are being met in every way, shape or form. So, but it is definitely, I think that fear of burnout is definitely it's very tough, very tough.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a balancing act, being able to obviously monitor yourself and your own needs and expectations and your own energies. I know for myself, and I'm sure the rest of you can relate around the, you know, stretching yourself too thin sometimes with the various roles and responsibilities that we have, you know, in our lives. And I think, yeah, as you said, it's tough, and it's important that we have that balancing act and being able to check in with ourselves to ensure that we're not, you know, burning ourselves out. And I think, you know, something that I would like to reflect on is that at times our lives can be chaotic. You know, it can be like a plane that's, you know, going to go crash and everyone's oxygen masks are coming down, right? And I think for many of our young people who are leaders, they will go around trying to put everybody else's oxygen mask on before they put their own on. And I think it's on us to ensure that, you know, as for those that are listening and watching in, that, as you said, surround yourself around strong people, around your mentors. The power of mentoring is incredible, so that they can help you to put your own oxygen mask on and be in a position where you actually help the rest of your community or your family to put theirs on too. So, yeah, thank you for that, Joy. That was really good. I want to just transition slightly into talking about, you know, we've been speaking internally around what do our communities need, and it's so important that we look after ourselves first. But naturally, what will come out of this is, you know, various questions from the wider community of Victoria, the rest of the non-Indigenous community. How do young people, you might be going to school and hearing about treaty, how do they face the questions that they may get from their peers? And often, I know from my experience, the questions aren't often nice. They don't come across in a genuine, caring way. How are young people supposed to navigate that world when there might be the only black fellow in their class and they have to speak on behalf of other black fellows? How have you done it, or how do you think other young people should do it?
I always look at information and resources. Like when we ask these questions of young people, it's like, who are we answering for? You know, because it's a different perspective when you ask what is culture for, like, to a young black fella. You get like a number of mixed emotions and different perspectives. But yeah, I think one of the big things is who, like the commission, this treaty commission, who's it for? From what perspective? Who, like, what are we trying to fulfill? If we're really just telling stories and experiences of our shared past as Indigenous peoples, that should be open to everybody, because our future is within Australia. And it shouldn't, if it singles someone out, like, I feel like we're going to fail young black kids in that regard, where it's like, you know, it shouldn't be used as a tool or a resource to say you have to be an expert in this, because we're all just learning at the same time, you know? Yeah, it's interesting. And
Sure.
like, I always ask that question of like, who's this information for? Who would benefit from this?
Yeah.
And I would hope everyone does.
Yeah.
But in that situation where you have that young person who's, you know, the only black fella in their class, I would hope that it doesn't single them out
Yeah.
as you need to be an expert on this. You need to understand all the stories. I feel like it should be an empowering thing for him or her or them, you know, and not just something that will discourage their willingness to identify, you know?
For sure. Well, yourself, Bonnie, any thoughts? How do young people navigate, the questions that they may get faced at school and at, you know, in sport, whatever it may be, wherever the space may be?
Yeah, and like I'd like to see that with the information that comes out, that it's not always fallen on that one young black fella in the class or on their own and expecting them to be experts. It's providing the resources, and I think it's important. Like there's a lot of talk around like the impact of intergenerational trauma, but what there also is the intergenerational resilience, and that's something as well we need to hold on to, and something that we need to highlight, and not just in NAIDOC week and not just when things come up. I think for me, like I've been that only black fella sitting in a class, and they'll put on something and expect me to know the answer, and I don't. And I think and that's okay, but it's also understanding why we might not know these things. And like recently sitting in a classroom with a couple of young fellas and sharing a story of looking at different role models and looking at what they've done, and first time that I actually heard the term like stolen generation, and they sit there and they look at me and they go, well, do you think we're all taken from our parents? Does that mean we're stolen gen? And like not actually understanding why they might not have the strong connections, and being able to talk through that, like because of what you've been through and what your parents have been through and your grandparents, that's why you might not have strong connections, but how can we bridge that for you now? Who do we need to link you in with? What's that going to look like? And understanding that it looks different for everyone, that not every young fellow can dance or they play music or learn their language. Like some young people, that's their strength. Like they might be able to pick language up really quickly, and others it might be, and not everyone can paint. I think that's the other thing too, the pressure I've seen on young fellas that everyone's going to be an artist. I'm like, I'm definitely not. I wish I was, but it's looking at individual strengths and just being able to, Aunt was touching on around that we're the first of so many different things, and that there's so many different spaces that we can excel in and do well in, and I think highlighting those as well and learning more. Yeah,
for sure.
Always learning more.
For sure. And for yourself, Geordie Russ?
Yeah, I'd say as Bonnie, you know, I was the only black kid in most of my classes, and at one stage my whole school. You know, and I only kind of learned after I left school, you know, the best way to answer those questions. You don't have to have all the answers, but the best way to feel confident in when those questions and those situations arise is, you know, just educate yourself to your best ability. You know, really started to dive into, you know, our past histories and policies that have held us back, and all the systems that held us back. You know, when I left school, I started work at the Heritage Trust, Koorie Heritage Trust. That's what really opened the avenue to where I am now. You know, the beauty is that most of those things, you know, policies and all the atrocities, massacres, whatever they are, you know, bad and good, are all on our phones, you know, all on the internet. So research, you know, and some of it can be, you know, hella boring, you know. Yeah. It's a lot of it's just like, you know, government jargon. But then there's also the, you know, those stuff that you're like, oh, that's why those systems are in play now. That's why those organisations are set up now. So yeah, you know, just doing hardcore research and diving deep into everything that is, you know, put us into the position that we're in now. You know, look at it, you know, locally and regionally on how you're in, you know, whether it's in Victoria or wherever it is. You know, look at it in your local area, everything that happened there. Look at the state, you know, then look at Australia and realise, okay, this why, you know, some states are behind in other things and we're not, you know. So yeah, that was the main thing that if I, you know, could give my 15-year-old self, you know, something is to just go hard on research. on everything that happened. That's the best way to. It just empowers you. Makes you feel confident in any situation that you could. Someone throws it at you. You can either dive into it, or you could step back and be like, it's not worth my energy. I already know the answer. It's not worth my energy, or and that just saves yourself. But it definitely empowers you when you understand everything that's happened to make you end up where you are and where your mob are.
100%, and I really resonate with that as well. I think myself, similar stories to you both in terms of being the only black kid in my class, until my younger cousins and my younger brother came up, only black kid in school. So I definitely agree with what you said there, Geordie. In terms of, for me, it was always about yarning with my dad and my mum about who we are, the proud families that we come from. It was yarning with my great aunties about Karamangundra walk-off and what happened. I had the privilege to have a yarn with my auntie Frances, who was involved with the walk-off at that time as a young girl. And so for me, you may not necessarily have these people in your life that I was lucky enough to have, but as Geordie said, the accessibility of the Koorie Heritage Trust, for one, is probably a really good place to start for young people out there who may be faced with these questions and don't know how to answer them with strength and conviction. But as you said, by finding out that information, it gives you that strength and conviction, that power to be, what, I don't have to answer this right now. Or, actually, this is who I am. I'm Dougie Briggs. I'm this, this, and this. You can't challenge me in that. So I think, really resonate with what you said there, Braz. It's really, really powerful.
I also feel like there's a lot of prominent black people in our communities and online. If we're talking about access and resources, there's a lot of black people TikTok, it blowing up, Instagram blowing up. It's got all these black people that make resources and speak on different issues that we can access. And these are I'd much rather listen to them and all their stuff and support them as black peoples than someone doing a dance. You know what I mean? And I feel that's important to build up those spaces, because it's that doesn't have any region, that doesn't have any limitation. The only limitation is what they put out, and I feel if they're supported in that regard, where we're sharing their information, but also taking that on for ourselves.
Yeah,
we'll grow from that.
That's a perfect little segue. I was just going to ask, who or what, in terms of where you get your information from in the past. Now, are there anybody that you like to just, recommend for young people out there that they should maybe have a listen to these people? They've got something really deadly to say. Or there's this book that I read that was really incredible. Was there anyone that, Bonnie, you can think of that you want to give a little shout out to?
Put me on the spot.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's too many, I think to list. But particularly for me, growing up, I grew up in my non-Aboriginal side of the family, and so still having that access to the Aboriginal side, and my aunties there being able to support me and support my journey. So knowing that, I don't know, I'm just trying to think, but one that does stick out for me is through school. I hated it. And I still talk to my career educator today and still catch up with her when I go back home, and that was a fair bit of introduction to me, for me, with community home, and I remember telling them that I was going for a job within a school. I didn't give too much context, and she said she wished she could have told me when I was 16, because I probably would have told her where to go, because I was that's the last place I'm going. But to see, I think it's just being able to be open as well to who that might be. I've had a number of people along the way, and I guess you do always come back to family as well, and it's something that I'm still learning and being open to still learning. I don't know a lot, but it's around how I can draw on, I guess, people around me for their strength and
for sure
understanding.
For sure. Geordie, Chris?
Yeah, obviously my family, first and foremost, everyone that I was raised around, and then, going in deep, I was definitely, I hate reading, but I love, reading, books, like history books.
Yeah.
It was only because I knew I had to get that knowledge. You want to read just a normal novel, I probably didn't have the patience. I should say probably I don't have the patience. But yeah, just diving into books for my local area, for my mobs, specifically first, and then broadening out to the wider communities. And that's what kind of helped me to get through. But family, is always at
Sure.
at the start.
Family. I think echoing the other panelists. For me, it's always been my uncles and my mother figures, my father figures, my cousins, my older cousins. But like I said, we have this access to the internet. Let's use it. You know, it's one of the greatest things in the world at the moment, and I feel like there's a lot of hardworking people, black people within our communities, within the Victorian community, who do a lot of this gathering of resources and putting that out there for free. That's what gets me, is like, there's these black people who don't get anything from this other than, the love and affection and, doing it off their own bats, and it's worthwhile because it educates everybody. It educates, it hits those people in the middle, It hits the people on both ends of the spectrum, but like the whole spectrum, which is something very powerful. And I feel like moving forward, we should access that.
100%. So then, in each of your roles, as I said, you do a lot of community-facing work. You involve within community, within the organisations, and then outside the 9 to 5. How do you ensure that you're accountable and transparent to your community in the roles that you do professionally and personally? After you.
Well, yeah.
Don't look at me.
I know, I'm just I think, for me, it's been able to look at and draw on the people that I look up to and the people that are my supporters, and the biggest thing is to feel like what I've done is enough, and to be able to accept that and know my limitations. I think I'm not going to be able to do everything and be everything that particularly for me, for young fellas that I'm working with, but how can I link them to the people that can do that? I think that's. And then,
No, that's right.
I feel like as Indigenous peoples, we take our work home with us. It's there when we wake up. It's on our everyday thought. We don't have the luxury to switch off all the time, which can be hard. But I think especially down home. My work definitely comes home with me because the kids that I'm working with, these youth, are like my nieces and nephews, my cousins. Right. Like my cousins' kids, they call me uncle, and it's like, it's part of that process.
That's right.
And I want to be there for them. And like I said, I had that kind of support growing up for myself, so I want to do that for somebody else. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, my partner Lil, she definitely keeps me grounded, and I always make sure I check with her and see if I'm being a hero head or not. Same as the rest of my family, and I say I've got some really good and strong mentors, and Johnny Bell's one of my go-to men that I'll ring up, be like, look, am I overthinking this one? Am I doing okay in this one? And he'll send me on my way to. And tell me what's right. So, I've got some really good networks that make sure and keep me in check, and all the aunties and uncles that will tell me, especially for treaty, ring me out of the blue and ask me 24 questions and then bounce. So, but it's really good that I can, I don't have a work phone. Like my personal phone is my work phone, and it's just, everyone can ring me out any time and, either rip me or tell me I'm doing a good job. So
That's it.
I feel like that's another, like, we don't always have to get everything right. And we're, like, as young peoples, we're expected to learn, and we're all on this journey, and, like, that's why one of the big topics that we've talked about today has been what supports can be put in place, because we know we're not going to always get it right. And we're human beings, but it's just about nurturing that mentality of, like, you're going to muck up, but we're going to put you on the right path, or here's how to do it. Yeah, I feel like that's a big point as well. Yeah,
for sure. So then, we've touched on it a little bit, just in terms of, like, I think particularly last year in COVID, I know for myself, I wasn't able to go on country and practice culture. I wasn't able to be back home and, on the banks of the Dungla, on the Murray. And that's something that's really important for me. And I know for a lot of young mob who either might be heavily connected and have great knowledge of their culture, and for mob who, on the other end, they don't necessarily know much about it. How do we ensure and how do we keep culture involved in young people's lives? I know you do your men's group and your youth groups, Geordie, through Watherong and through the stuff you're doing with Werdy and whatnot. How do you keep culture in your life, and can we share that with other mob?
Yeah, it goes back to empowering myself first, and now that I've got kids, it's making sure that they just get a better head start in life and better cultural start in life than what I did. My dad was bouncing between the mission and Geelong. His father was born and raised on the mission. His father was taken from Cumra. It was just like, I had to make sure, okay, well, there's 5 generations that didn't have language, so I need to pick up the language part. Give it. That's why Mandara is the only one I could speak right now. He's learning Koorie, Pickwadong and Watherong, and we'll learn his other languages in Nunda and Palawakani and everything like that afterwards. So it's about empowering myself in order to then spread it. I was lucky that I'm raised and still live on my country. On one of my countries in Watherong country, but during the COVID time, sometimes I don't need, the coast, or I don't need the river, I need the desert,
That's right.
So, and I couldn't get up there. So I had to wait, that whole year until I go up at the end of the year to go through law, which was massive. But, in order to pass that knowledge on, definitely have to empower yourself first to then start to, be confident to then, I can pass that on because I know it,
That's right.
As I said, I've got good connects around me and good links that keep me on check. And, but in order to pass that, especially like with the Cocoa blokes down home in Warrnambool, pass them 2 new dances that I was taught, passing that to them is, still one of my biggest achievements. And, they do that on a daily basis, which is awesome. So, it's just empowering yourself to then pass it on.
That's right. I remember my first Aboriginal Justice Forum that Indy put me up to was down in Warrnambool. I think I was probably in the role maybe a month, and the Cocoa blokes come through, did the dancing and everything. It was just incredible. And I think, as you said, it's groups like that where we're empowering our young people to be involved in culture and live and breathe it is really powerful. I think, not to say to take anything away from Cocoa blokes, but how can we replicate that around the rest of the state? I think is some really deadly lessons to be learnt. I want to throw it to you, Bonnie, and I know that through your story, what you've touched on, you didn't necessarily grow up on country, you grew up in Gunai-Kurnai country. What's your story with connecting to culture, connecting back to culture, as you sort of touched on a little bit?
Yeah, like I'm still finding that myself, and I still find calling Benstyle home and Gippsland home, but starting to get down to Gunditjmara Jamara country and being able to just get out there and start learning and starting my journey down there. And like for me, I look at like my dad and what he's been through and being removed as a baby and understanding that why he hasn't been able to pass that on for me, and looking at how when I have kids, how I want to be able to share that and be that person that can start introducing them and supporting them from the start, and it doesn't have to be something that comes later. So it's that yeah, I don't know, like, I think that's probably a key part, and just, I think being open, like I've said, can't paint, but COVID, I learned how to weave, and
I was gonna
I've
say.
been working on it, my first pair of earrings, and that is something that I guess made me proud and something that I can wear and show, but not something for everyone either. But I
Yeah.
think just finding those little things that you can do every day, if it's driving home, and I've got a fair commute, about an hour a day, so it's making those phone calls. Like I find I knock off work, but I'm spending the next hour on the phone or sitting in the driveway still on the phone talking about work or talking around different things and different ideas, and that's sometimes the best time as well. But yeah.
I'm glad you talked about your earrings. I was trying to give you a little handball there so you can just like just leave a little plug, a little shout out at Deadly. No, but that's exactly right. I think it is as we've said, and as each of us has touched on, it's a journey. It's not one that we should expect it to know all the answers straight away. You know, whether it's through language and learning language and passing that on to the next generation, to our children, whether it's practicing weaving. You know, we may not be a Deadly artist and whatnot, but I think, yeah, whatever that thing may be, it's really important. What about yourself, Chris, Bros? How do you keep connected to culture? You're obviously living on country.
Yeah, living on Gunditjmara country down in Portland and Hayward. I just try to, you try to give the experiences that I've been privileged enough to be able to go out to Lake Conda Mission and see the old mission and the dormitory where like these sad stories. And that's the thing. It's not always like with our culture as our shared experience culture as Victorian Aboriginal people, it's one of dispossession. It's one of like, it's resilience as well, but there's a lot of sadness in that. There's a lot of strength and there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of stuff that, we as young people are gonna have to, front up to and take on as well, because it's, we talk about a lot intergenerational trauma, and that's sadly, it's a big part of culture like today. All the complexities that come with that as well. And we see it in all communities. But yeah, I think we like one of the big things is like, we now have the privilege to be able to go out and learn our culture freely without any restrictions.
Yeah.
Like a generation ago, we like our families would have had the fear of doing like speaking as freely as we can now.
That's right.
Basket weaving, like down home, used to be so like it was a thing where like our aunties couldn't teach their daughters because they were scared of their daughters' kids getting taken away.
That's right.
And that was a legitimate fear, and it's part of that story. And we should take advantage of our freedom to do that. Because it's so powerful, and it's something that our ancestors, our nans and their siblings could have never dreamed of never hoped for. But we get to live that, and that's powerful.
100%, so powerful. And it really makes me touch on, these stories that you said, whether it's the basket weaving for mob down in Gunditj country, or whether it's, practicing language. I know, like, through myself, Yoo-rrook language was only really revitalised through our native title case that we fought for, and we get to show that we had continued connection to country, continued connection to language, and it's come through that. What are some of the stories that you hope the Truth and Justice Commission will address or will speak about that may be important to you relative to your mobs, or just really personal to yourselves? What are some of the stories you want to be heard and talked about? And I'll give you a second to think about that, because it is a really big question. But as you touched on there with the basket weaving, I think it's important that we can speak about some of the things that we're proud of and that we feel it needs to be addressed.
I'll probably jump in real quick. Less specific to Gunditjmara or like our families, but like something that I feel like all Aboriginal peoples that have been affected by colonialism can talk on is, this story of dispossession and the story of something lost, I hope that the Truth and Treaty Commission, like that we see this narrative of like, that there was a pre-existing culture here before. We know that. But we like, for some reason, that's not on the forefront of educated like other people on. So yeah, I feel like it's easy it's easier for us to say the good. The hard bit that I feel like the Truth Commission should focus on and should play a role in is the story of our dispossession and what we've lost, because it also tells a story of resilience.
That's right.
Our shared resilience as peoples.
The continued resilience, for sure.
Yeah.
What do you reckon, Bonnie? What are some of the stories that you've been taught, maybe? I know we had the privilege of going down to Lakes for a Koorie Youth Council executive meeting recently, and you shared a story there. Is there any other stories that you've come across that you hope to be shared with the rest of the rest of the states, the rest of the Victorian society?
Putting it out there, hey?
Yeah, just real quick.
Oh, here I am. I'm sitting here. I've got this bracelet on, and something that's close to me that I actually had a young fella make a year or two ago, and always something that I think keeps me grounded as well, and understand the privilege that I have to be sitting here and being able to share stories or share experiences. And I think, and something that comes to mind, I guess, how sometimes I don't think desensitized is, or like how things can become the norm, like just what you expect. And for this young fellow in particular, like the last thing I think of is that I want to see family and my nephews or nieces in justice, and I have, and it's not like, but it's not like I shouldn't say it doesn't hit me, but it doesn't surprise me. Yeah. So I think like that's the biggest thing I want to see is that shift, that things are not normalised in a way that, because of what we've been through, or I guess that understanding of that can get out there, that it's not just black fellas filling up prisons, that actually because of all these things that have happened, that is why. Yeah. And that's not their fault, that might not be their parents' fault either, but it's because of all these things. So I think just having that out there, more accessible, I think that needs to be definitely at the forefront, but also a way to share those stories in a safe space that gives them, I think, empowerment as well. Like I think we don't want to lose that.
Absolutely. Auntie Janet touched on it with her welcome to country and talking about they were the first explorers, the first astronomers, the first scientists, and I think something that Michael shared with me with the stuff that he does is that our people were warriors, not gangsters. That to be black is to be proud. It doesn't necessarily have that deficit effect, which yes, we might all love Devon and tomato sandwich, or we might love chicken salt on my chips, but those things aren't intrinsically black in terms of because we might have black fellas in prison and black fellas involved with justice. That doesn't make it a black issue. I think that's a really important thing, not to normalise that stuff for sure. And so then we talk about, to flip it a little bit again, we touched on about young people being involved and how we support and nurture them to step up if they feel they want to and if they feel they can step up. I'm going to ask you this question, Jordan. I know Mandara, you want to have a yarn, and if you want to have a yarn too, I want to know what you reckon, Uncle. But for young people that are interested in joining and being a part of the Assembly, what will be required of them? What is required of you as a young person on the Assembly, and what should they be aware of to step up?
Yeah, I'm going to talk, mate. Definitely sign up to be members, so then that information is directly given to you via email and other avenues, and that's just a way that then you guys are getting that information directly, and you can inform yourselves. In terms of after our sittings, applying or wanting to be elected into the Assembly, 100%. This is a time where a thing that I've noticed being on the Assembly is how visionary young minds are. A lot of the fellas that are on there, a lot of the people that are on there, think, because we've set these ACCOs up, we've done this here, that this is the best way to go. When all across the world, the people that are leading the change in terms of First Nations issues, a lot of it is people who are youth, who are younger. it's just because the way that the world has gone and how we can actually change the way that we think. So I think 100%, you know, put your hand up. That way we got, there's no real barriers, when, for young people. There's no, in terms of, I know, mate. In terms of, of people's age or mobs, for young people, there's no real barriers, because we know, well, there's no point in fighting over that, because this is, in order to get the right outcome, we need to get over that. And a lot of people are stuck, in those old school ways, and we don't need to be anymore. So 100%, we need more young people on there.
That's right, 100%. I think, as you said, young people are visionary. We're not tied down by the barriers that may exist and the bureaucracy that exists sometimes, and the mechanisms that involve within government. We're not slowed by that. So I think it's a really important thing for young people to not shy away from these opportunities that do exist. It's not shy away from if you're comfortable stepping up into these spaces and knowing that, as Geordie touched on in the Assembly, and I know from my experience in the spaces that I've sat on, our old people want us to be involved. They encourage us to be involved. They've been fighting this fight for decades, and they're getting tired themselves, and they're getting to the point where they will need to step down. So it's important for us as young people to take that baton with strong hands and encourage yourselves to do the things that's needed, so that the likes of young Mundara here and the next generation of young people to come, that they're going to stand on even stronger shoulders than the ones that we've had the privilege of standing on. Really well said. And I think with that being said, I'll give you the opportunity to have some closing comments before we pass it out to the audience for some Q&A. But if you want to say any other things before we wrap up there. Any other final comments?
I think, in these spaces like KYC and like the YIRRAMBOI, have this conversation. I feel like, take up every opportunity you can as young people, especially young black people, because, your voices are so important, and that journey you're on is only going to grow more from it. So I think that's one of my big things is, take every opportunity you can, do what you can, because you'll be supported as well from all avenues.
For sure.
There's like Chris said, there's so many opportunities for our young mob now. We just need to take every chance and go for it. Because we'd be doing a disservice to our people before us if we didn't take those opportunities. So, take as many opportunities as you can in order to better yourself, better the mob.
Bonnie?
I don't think there's too much more to add, other than I think, just making the most of it. But also, if being okay with saying no for some, like we know that it's sometimes always the same people that we're calling on or that might be calling on us. So I think just trying to find that balance with yourself.
That's right. Go for Mr. and Miss Nadoc. Look, 3 Mr. Nadocs up here now. May as well. No, just a little plug there. Trying to big note myself. I'm sorry. With that being said, if there are any questions...
If we're big noting ourselves real quick, I'm the longest reigning Mr. Nadoc, thanks to Auntie Rona.
COVID.
just so everybody knows, there was no re-elected. I'm still Mr. Nadoc now.
I gave him that torch.
I gave you both. But anyway. Any questions from the audience there? Roving mic. Couple in chat.
How has the younger generation's thinking shifted since our parents and grandparents?
You're right.
No, you go. You go.
Are you sure?
I'm on daddy duties.
Okay. No, I feel like it goes back to, that opportunity. Our parents and grandparents haven't had the opportunity. They haven't had access. Like I said, we have no barriers in terms of resources because it's all on our phone. One of the biggest influences we have is, you know, in our hand, and I feel like if we take advantage of that, it's a big positive. But yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna on a similar track. You know, I just look back at where my grandfather, where my grandfather was. You know, born and raised on a mission at Fram. To them, starting up Wurrung Aboriginal Cooperative. Just he would finish his normal job, working on the tugboats, working on the boats in the bay, and then up until 1, 2 in the morning with 4 or 5 other community members to try and better the outcome of the mob there. And then my dad bounced between the mission and Geelong, and he went to it was like a tech school. Like, I don't even think those things exist anymore. And to him be the chair, he grew up, pop working, on the farms before he worked in the tugboat, so having no money. I'm talking, mate. And then, to where look at all the opportunities that I could get, from all those people previously is, it's been kind of a walk in the park. Well, my grandfather definitely would have thought, back in the day. So, it's definitely changed.
For sure.
I think also it's just making sure that we acknowledge what's happened and why we have these opportunities. So I think, like, even if we might have different views or the direction might be changing to what things might have initially been set up as, or what views might be had, and how we can have those conversations in a respectful manner, I think.
Sure.
I've got one more, which is, should the First Peoples Assembly have a youth voice similar to an elder's voice, not to duplicate the deadly work of KYC, but to provide input into the treaty process? Question 2 or 3.
Yeah, 100%. And there has been yarns about it, and Sissy was before she stepped down, was a really big key part in pushing that. 100% there should be a youth voice there, just because it's, especially youth in Victoria. Like, you look at all different parts of Australia, all the different states. Then the youth of Victoria just are, they're on a different level. New South Wales are up there, and but we've got a lot more opportunities here. It helps that we've got a government that are open to talking. They do a lot for themselves, but we can use that to our advantage. We're just on another level in terms of progression. And yes, we're still not at the level that we want to be at. It should definitely have a youth voice. As I said, Sissy was a really big push in that.
Bonnie, Chris, anything else you want to add on that?
I think there's definitely a space for it. I think, just to make sure that we're, at the end of the day, once this commission gets happening and the truth and justice, I guess, is told, that they're going to be the ones that are carrying it. So I think it's not saying that theirs is the only voice, but it's ensuring that, I guess, they're given the skills as well to carry it. But yeah, I don't know how it would fit on par, with an elders council. It's not up there, but I think it's important.
For sure.
Yeah, I feel like it. As young people, we're going to be reflected in those representatives that are there to represent us in the Truth Commission, but also the First Peoples Assembly. I feel like those people are there to do a job, and they want to represent all aspects of our community, so they'll be hitting those targets, and we'll be watching them, and we'll be holding them accountable as much as possible.
That's right. Were there any other questions, Indy, or from the audience? Anyone wanted to jump in?
Hey guys, one of the jobs that I have is creating safe spaces for mob where their country isn't in Victoria. So my question is, what advice can you give to young mob where their country isn't in Victoria, but they want to, you know, feel included in the Victorian Aboriginal community.
Silly question.
Yeah, I was just looking at.
I feel like there's a that's a shared story of like Victoria as well, because like some of the early discussions we were having as like the community assembly before like the first people's assembly was even brought together was we have a prominent history of dislocation, you know, and with that we're already dealing with members of our community that have built like the community, like the Torres Strait Islander community within Melbourne is so strong. They help with the creation of the Aboriginal Advancement League. You know, that their names and their families have such a strong connection to that institution for Aboriginal peoples all over Victoria. I feel like, you know, if you're living here as an Indigenous person but your country's not in Victoria, you still got to treat it as your own. You know, it like whenever we go somewhere and we're on someone else's country, we treat it with respect, and keeping that same ideals that the old mob would have had when they go to someone else's country. You know, with respect and you know, accountability for self as well. Yeah, I feel like they're important characteristics to have when creating these spaces.
Did you know anything, Bonnie?
Yeah, I think the respect thing's probably the biggest. Like I think we need to create a space that we can be inclusive of mob that are living here because you're still contributing. What that looks like and also how comfortable or how we can welcome mob living on country. Like I think I always struggle with that as well, like growing up not on my country, even though it's still in Victoria, and understand that I guess a lot more fortunate that it's more accessible. So
Yeah, I think it's definitely a case by case, community by community. You know, see what they, because each community is different. Like Geelong's, it's got the highest rate of stolen gen people, you know, displaced people, you know, based there and in that region. You know, so our community is full of people who aren't from there. Yeah, and a lot of them were from, you know, interstate as well. In now, you know, today's. But then you look at like, you know, places like Warrnambool where it's like 90%, you know, people there are the Koorie Youth, you know, claim Gunditj, you know, so it's definitely a case by case, community by community, and see, you know, how they do it, you know, and for us, like, you know, the co-op, our local ACO was based upon, you know, stolen gen and displaced people, you know, that's what the ACO was based upon. So that foundation is still there in terms of how we make mob who aren't from there, because majority of the people you ask or where you're from, they're not from Wadawurrung country. You know, so it's just about like, it doesn't matter, you are, you know, you're born and raised here, you know, this is your community. You know, yes, it's Wadawurrung country, but this is, you know, we're part of the Wadawurrung community. So, yeah, it's definitely a community by community, I feel, across the state of Victoria.
Definitely. Well said. Couldn't have said it better myself, each of you. That being said, that wraps us up for Young Mob Yarns with the Koorie Youth Council and YIRRAMBOI. We thank you all for joining in. If you joined in online or in person here, we thoroughly appreciate the time taken out. Thank each of our panellists for taking the time out of their days to be here. We thoroughly appreciate your insights, your perspective, the wisdom and knowledge that you hold for your mob, for your families, and sharing some of that with us. Definitely appreciate it. So thank you all. For those, yep, Indy's trying to tell me something, but I can't hear him. Sorry, Buzz.
Just to say that Arnie Dyer's an apology and sends her love to everybody here today and to all the mob on the Zoom.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, as Indy said, Arnie Dyer's an apology today. She couldn't be here to do a welcome from Wurundjeri people on behalf of Wurundjeri. So thank you, Arnie Dyer, for letting us know. It's a shame you couldn't be here, but we definitely understand and sending love to you. Hope you're going well. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. As we said, this process within the Truth and Justice Commission is only starting. The commissioners should be announced in the coming days, tomorrow hopefully. Make sure you stay in touch with what's going on in the First Peoples Assembly. Become a member, to sign up to those newsletters, to the information that's getting out there. Go find out what's going on in your ACOs. Go find out what's going on in communities, even if you're not necessarily, Victorian traditional owner. We're still part of our community as Aboriginal people, and I feel that very strongly about, the Victorian community is a very welcoming community, as our panellists have touched on. And, just better inform yourselves so that you can educate yourself and come from a place of strength and conviction to then share that with your families, to share that with your peers. This journey it starts today, but it doesn't end anytime soon. So there's nothing but time for us to share that with one another. Thank you. Have a good night. Take care.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and around the world.